because of the courage and professionalism of law enforcement. The officers who responded without hesitation and did their jobs as they were trained to do. Secret Service agents promptly tackled and detained the suspect, Cole Thomas Allen. The president and all the protectees and participants at the dinner were safe. One brave officer was injured and is receiving care and has been released from the hospital. I want to make this clear. This man was a floor above the ballroom with hundreds of federal agents between him and the President of the United States. The Department of Justice approaches incidents like this with urgency and clarity of purpose. Violence has no place in civic life. It cannot and will not be used to disrupt democratic institutions or intimidate those who serve them, and it certainly cannot continue to be used against the President of the United States. We are investigating this matter fully. We will apply the law fairly, and we will ensure that accountability is swift and certain. But we also should recognize what did not happen. Law enforcement did not fail. They did exactly what they are trained to do. This was not an accident. It was the result, as we know now, of preparation. But the men and women who protected us that night were trained, professional, and had an enduring commitment to the rule of law. Today, the Department of Justice filed 3 federal charges in United States District Court against Cole Thomas Allen. The first count is attempted assassination of the President of the United States. This count is punishable by up to life in prison. The second count is interstate transportation of a firearm to commit a felony. This is punishable by up to 10 years in prison. And the third count is discharge of a firearm during a crime of violence, which is punishable by a mandatory minimum term of imprisonment of 10 years, a maximum of life, and the 10 years is consecutive to any other sentence imposed. Just to go through very quickly the timeline, which many of you in this room already know. The defendant, Allen, made a hotel reservation at the Washington Hilton for April 24th through April 26th. On April 21st of this year, he traveled by train from Los Angeles to Chicago and then from Chicago to Washington, D.C. On April 24th, he arrived in Washington, D.C. at approximately 1 o'clock in the afternoon and checked into the Washington Hilton. Approximately at 8:40 on the night of April 25th, Allen approached a security checkpoint on the terrace level of the hotel, which is again a floor above where the dinner was taking place. He ran through the magnetometer holding a long gun. As he did so, U.S. Secret Service personnel assigned to the checkpoint heard a loud gunshot. One Secret Service officer was shot in the chest, but was wearing a ballistic vest that worked. This heroic officer who was hit fired 5 times at Allen, who was not shot but fell to the ground and was promptly arrested. I want to thank everybody who worked tirelessly on Saturday, Sunday, and continuing today. This includes members of the FBI, and Director Patel is going to address that in a minute. It includes members of the Metropolitan Police Department who were immediately on the scene, the chief, the mayor, to make sure that law enforcement was available to do their jobs and had all the tools they needed to do so. And lastly, the United States Attorney's Office here in D.C., our U.S. Attorney Jeanine Pirro and her team. A prosecutor stayed up all night long, didn't sleep all day yesterday, making sure that we got what we needed from all over the country. It included search warrants in California, search warrants here in D.C., multiple interviews that have been conducted already of witnesses and of family members of the charged individual, and continue to work hard today. This investigation is ongoing. It's not complete. A lot of the information that the media is hearing through leaks or sources, some of it is true, some of it is not true, and at the right time you will hear information from us as appropriate. I'd like to ask our U.S. Attorney, Jeanine Pirro, to say a few words, and then followed by Director Patel. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Attorney General. Cole Allen's journey of accountability in the criminal justice system starts today. Todd Blanche just indicated to you the charges. Those charges are only 3 charges that are in the complaint that has been presented in federal district court about an hour ago. There will be additional charges as this investigation continues to unfold. But make no mistake, this was an attempted assassination of the President of the United States, with the defendant making clear what his intent was. And that intent was to bring down as many of the high-ranking cabinet officials as he could. This is the kind of situation that we cannot tolerate. And as the Attorney General has just indicated, it could have been so much worse, but for the reality that we had the Secret Service as well as the Metropolitan Police Department and the FBI. Now, the facts make it very clear what this intent was. You may recall that it was on March 2nd that the president indicated that he would be attending this public event at the Hilton. And on April 6th, that's when Cole Allen first made a hotel reservation at the Washington Hilton for 3 nights, the 24th, the 25th, and the 26th. It was on April 21st that he traveled all the way from the West Coast, from his home near L.A. He gets to Chicago on April 23rd, and has been indicated he arrives in D.C. on the 24th, and he checks into the hotel at about 3 p.m. He stays overnight. He is very much aware that the president and the first lady entered the ballroom at 8 p.m. And it was at 8:40 that he made a decision to rush the ballroom. And thank goodness, law enforcement, the Secret Service, was able to prevent him from getting into that ballroom. He was not injured other than some kind of scrape on his knee. Now, as indicated, these are the weapons that the defendant had on his person. You can see that's a 12-gauge pump-action Mossberg shotgun. It's a .38 semi-automatic. He had at least 3 knives and all kinds of paraphernalia. So any suggestion that he wasn't there to do harm is absurd. We will prove when he purchased these guns. They were purchased in California. Why is that relevant? It is relevant because he crossed interstate lines with those firearms. And those are the firearms that he used on the night of the 25th, or attempted to use at the very least. Now, the manifesto also makes clear about his expected rules of engagement. You know, you can look at it and read it, and it may seem kind of la, but at the end, make no mistake, he says, I am targeting the administration officials. They are my targets, and I'm prioritizing from the top down, the highest ranking from the lowest. And I will not hesitate to get involved in any kind of encounter with anyone who blocks me from the president. Now, finally, let me say one thing. Within days of the president nominating me to be the United States Attorney for the District of Columbia, I was at the scene of a double homicide where one Elias Rodriguez crossed state lines from Chicago with a firearm to commit a felony in the district. He's now indicted for the murder of 2 individuals, Laron Lashinsky and Sarah Milgram, here in Washington. Not long after that, another individual, Ramanullah Lachenwall, crossed state lines, again with a firearm, with intent to commit a felony here in Washington. He traveled from the state of Washington. He is now indicted with the murder of Sarah Beckstrom, a National Guardsman, and the attempted murder of National Guard Andrew Wolf. Today, we have Cole Allen, another individual, charged with crossing state lines coming from California with a firearm with the intent to commit a felony here in the district. Let this be a message to anyone who thinks that Washington, D.C. is the place to act out political violence. And if you are willing to do so with a firearm and cross state lines, we will find you, we will track your steps from the inception of your plan, and we will prosecute you to the fullest extent of the law. Washington, D.C. is not the place to travel to commit acts of violence. The Constitution and the laws of the United States permit us to register our views through our voices and our votes. What they don't permit is making your views known through violence, especially violence directed at the President of the United States. This is anti-democratic at its core.
Thank you, Judge. Excuse me. Thank you, General. This one hits a little differently. We were all there. Many of you were there. Many of you watching were there as well. The president was there. The vice president was there. The cabinet was there. And what you saw described by the general and the U.S. attorney is absolutely true. The president spoke on late Saturday evening with the message of unity and a backing of law enforcement, and we have followed through on that message of unity and the effectuation of law enforcement across this country. This FBI is grateful to the United States Secret Service, the Department of Homeland Security, and our interagency partners, including the Metropolitan Police Department, for swiftly jumping into action. All of us on there put us in a unique position, but all of us also acted uniquely. The Washington field office jumped into action immediately, sending a mobile command center to the scene, along with our evidence response technicians, who showed up in speedy fashion to make sure we could collect the evidence that the prosecutors and the department needed to make this announcement today. Also on scene, you were told about the brave heroics of the United States Secret Service and other members of law enforcement. And that should be celebrated by every single American. They did exactly what they were trained to do. They stopped a massive attack from becoming even worse. They stood in the way, they safeguarded America, and they should be nothing but applauded for their bravery and their dedication to their mission and their selfless sacrifice to this country. The FBI, along with standing up mobile command units, evidence tech response team, and Washington SWAT on scene, also established our NC3, our National Crisis Coordination Center, almost immediately. And almost immediately in parallel, we stood up our command center at the Washington field office under ADIC Darren Cox's leadership. Throughout the evening, we immediately began working with our Department of Justice partners to find the evidence necessary to effectuate the legal process necessary and enter into the suspect's room at the Washington Hilton successfully and lawfully and obtain the relevant evidence for exploitation. That was on scene. Back at the headquarters division and the Washington field office, we were coordinating a national scale investigation that literally spanned from coast to coast. As you heard, FBI agents, along with the interagency, were immediately dispatched to the suspect's home in California, where we conducted interviews that provided critical information about this horrific attack. We also dispatched investigators and agents to New London, Connecticut, where we conducted further interviews that provided necessary information that you will find in this criminal complaint, as the United States Attorney has just laid out. While officers were working diligently through the night to conduct those interviews, we were also conducting interviews of witnesses on scene. Those interviews are ongoing. As you know, there was almost 2,000 people there. We are sifting through and prioritizing who to talk to, and we will get to each and every one of you with any bit of relevant information. Again, we ask everybody who has any relevant information, like I did on Saturday night with the president, 1-800-CALL-FBI. Any piece of information is information we want to have and must receive. On top of the on-scene response by this FBI, the headquarters response, and the Washington field office response, the FBI flipped on its enterprise-wide response to this critical incident. What does that mean? We dispatched fixed-wing assets across the country so that we could immediately transport evidence that was acquired in California and Connecticut and sent it to our laboratories in Quantico for analysis. We collected the shell casings on scene, including the firearms and the weapons that the judge talked about. Those were also sent to our Quantico laboratories for immediate analysis. America should be proud that this FBI acted with the urgency that was needed for the moment that we had to answer. The president rightly said that we will act in a unified fashion, and it's because of President Trump's leadership and backing of the blue, every single person in law enforcement that I stood with into the late evening hours on Saturday, early evening hours on Sunday, and all day yesterday and today are thrilled to wear the badge and defend this country. Each and every one of them deserves our thanks, And I encourage everyone listening to go out there and shake the hand of a federal agent or police officer and say thank you for doing their job. Thank you for training endlessly to make sure they meet the mission requirements. And for me, as the director of the FBI, I want to thank our headquarters components for working diligently with our prosecutors and make sure that the American public knows it's not just federal agents that do this work. It's our intelligence analysts, our support staff, our laboratories, our fixed-wing assets, our critical incident response groups, our hostage rescue teams. Agents sprung into action, got out of bed, and haven't slept since. These prosecutors haven't slept since, and I promise you they're not going to be sleeping. They are going to give you every piece of evidence. As the journal said, we will make public, when appropriate, to protect the integrity of this investigation, to make sure that due process is served, and we will meet the highest standards of the Constitution, as we always do. And that is when we will continue to disclose information. I know the public has a yearning for information, but just remind yourself of how much information you have already received, how transparent this administration has been. In less than 48 hours, you know almost every single thing we know. And what we have not told you yet, we will tell you in short order. So once again, from me, as director of the FBI, I want to thank the interagency. I want to thank the United States Secret Service and their director, Mark Wayne Mullen, the Secretary of Homeland Security, the Attorney General of the United States Attorney Pirro, and Ada Cox for springing into action on a night that should have been celebrating free speech, but we will be doing it again shortly, as the President said, and we look forward to seeing you all there.
Pierre.
Two questions, please. Beyond the evidence and what the judge described as the manifesto, what other evidence can you point to that tells us that the president was the primary target of the suspect?
So we're a day and a half into the investigation. As we talked about earlier, we were able to get multiple devices from various locations, the hotel room and also his where he lived in California. We have started that process. There's nothing more that would be appropriate to share at this time until we have thoroughly gone through it, which we're doing, and we'll share that information as appropriate in the future. Second question, go ahead.
Beyond the assassination attempts against President Trump, you had someone try to burn down the mansion where the governor lives in Pennsylvania. You had those state lawmakers attacked in Minnesota. You had 2 Israeli embassy staff members murdered in the city here. You had the Charlie Kirk assassination. You had the National Guardsman killed in the city. Can you, each of you, describe the current threat environment and what DOJ's stance is about it?
Well, you just described the current threat environment pretty accurately, which is that the political violence and rhetoric has got to stop. And that's something President Trump said right after the incident on Saturday night. It's something that Carolyn Leavitt talked about a couple hours ago. It is something that is, when you have a president who and many people in this room, if we're going to be honest about it, have done it as well. They're just as guilty as a lot of people on X. When you have reporters, when you have media just being overly critical and calling the president horrible names for no reason and without evidence, without proof, it shouldn't surprise us that this type of rhetoric takes place. If you look at what it appears that this defendant had in his past, we're talking about somebody who is college educated, who has a job, who is otherwise living his life. And we'll find out more about him, as I expect, in the coming days and weeks. But he chose to do what he did. And so our threat environment is, we are ready. I mean, I'm not going to go through what Director Patel just talked about with the way we responded. But this was something that we will always be prepared for. And it's sad that it has to happen, but it's not a new thing, unfortunately. Okay.
Have you been able to determine whether the gunman fired shots? If so, how many shots he fired, and who exactly, whose bullet hit the agent?
We want to get that right. So we're still looking at that. It appears, and I don't want to overstate because we are still looking at this, that there were five shots that law enforcement fired. We have all the evidence is being examined very carefully and expeditiously, and we'll know more soon. We do believe that, as the complaint lays out, that the suspect, that the defendant fired it out of his shotgun, and we know that happened. But as far as getting into exacting ballistics, I'm not going to do that today because it's still being looked at and finalized.
Thank you for taking my question. You personally have called for a construction of this ballroom at the White House. The president has called for this as well. Today, the National Trust president put out a statement, says that they're grateful that everybody's okay, but, and I quote, "We are not planning to voluntarily dismiss our lawsuit, which endangers no one, and which respectfully ask the administration to follow the law. Ballroom construction is continuing unabated until June 5th at the earliest because the injunction is on hold." Where does the Justice Department go from here? And then I have a follow-up on that.
Well, we filed a motion today asking the court to do what the plaintiffs refused to do. We absolutely believe that there is no better example of why this ballroom is necessary, aside from all the very positive things the ballroom will bring to this country and to Washington, D.C., than what happened on Saturday night. You guys, many of you all were there. That's one of the only places in D.C. that you can hold an event like that due to its size and the structure of what we need. So we're basically stuck at this point in the city with having an event like that at a hotel, so underneath a ton of hotel rooms. And so the fact that we, aside from the fact that the ballroom is spectacular, it's going to be beautiful, it's going to make this country look great every time it's used, it's also a meaningful safety issue. And so I very much wish that the plaintiffs and their counsel would take a different view, but if they don't, we are going to continue to fight in court like we have been, and hopefully the judges at the D.C. Circuit Court will do the right thing. Becky.
Are you aware of...
Not you, the red.
Thank you. Are you investigating connections that Cole Allen allegedly had to left-wing groups? I think one is called the Wide Awakes, reportedly.
Yes. Of course we're investigating that. Now you.
Are you aware of his video game development past, including a potential shooter-style RPG game?
I've seen the news reports that talk about that. I think that the positive and negatives of this type of case is that there's a lot of people investigating this man right now, including the FBI. But the only investigations that truly matter in the court of law are the ones that Director Patel and his men and women are doing. So we'll wait for them to do that and get an answer.
Just really quick, do you know anything about his alleged Christian faith past? Because he said something about it in the manifesto.
I have read reports in the news, and I've read reports that say various things regarding his views of Christianity, his views in the past of Christianity, and I'm certainly not going to speak to news reports. I will wait, as I hope all of you would, for the investigation to continue until we actually have answers. Yeah.
Just a little technical question. You mentioned that you guys, so far, you think that Allen fired at least one shot. That doesn't say that in the affidavit yet, so I'm just curious if you can explain the discharging of weapon charge at this point.
Well, he's charged with violating 924C, discharge of a firearm during a crime of violence. So by definition, that charge means that it was discharged. I can tell you from what I know, with the understanding that we're a day and a half in, that this is the gun that he discharged. Yeah. And as those of us that have ever shot one of these know, what happens when you shoot that is the casing stays inside the firearm, and then if you reload it, it pops it out. My understanding is that it was inside the firearm, but hadn't been ejected, which means that it hadn't been pulled back again. But again, I want folks to understand, I'm the acting attorney general. I'm not on the ground doing the investigation, so I'm telling you what I've been told, and we'll, if that information changes, I'm sure that we'll let you know. Yeah.
Just want to ask you about this letter that you posted yesterday that's sent from Brett Shumate to the plaintiffs in that lawsuit. It says that the Washington Hilton is, quote, demonstrably unsafe for the President of the United States. It said that with the ballroom, that Trump will no longer need to venture beyond the safety of the White House perimeter. Just engaging with those lines, was there an assessment in advance of the dinner that the Hilton was demonstrably unsafe? And if so, why was President Trump allowed to attend it? And then separately, just the idea that by building the ballroom, that President Trump wouldn't need to go outside of the confines of the White House. I mean, is that something that the American people, should find acceptable, that the president would have to be, for major events, confined to the White House? It seems like kind of a castle. situation.
That is obviously not what he means by that. And the fact that that question comes with respect to President Trump is laughable in the extreme. I mean, laughable in the extreme. You have a president who willingly speaks with you guys multiple times a day, I would say 7 days a week. He is active all over the country. I think with that, keeping it to the four corners of that statement, when he says demonstrably, it's demonstrated by what happened on Saturday night. So that doesn't mean that the Secret Service would ever let the president go into an unsafe environment. I know that the director of the Secret Service will be focused on making sure that we always keep him safe. And by the way, as we said before, and as anybody that was in that room knows, we were safe. We were safe. We heard a lot of loud noises that at the time many of us thought could be guns going off. It was mostly plates falling because of the staff, understandably, were running. So my reaction to that is I'll leave anything with respect to security up to the great men and women of the Secret Service. But when we talk about having an environment like the ballroom, it's an environment like what you saw last night. So an environment where you have a unique blend of cabinet members, leadership of this country, leadership of Congress, reporters and members of the public coming together for an event like that. That's different than other public-facing situations, which I have no doubt President Trump will continue to do as he said he would on Saturday night. Yeah.
Thank you. Is there, for FBI Director Patel, is there any other credible threats at this time related to events in the city, including King Charles? And then separately, the manifesto, I don't really want to give too much weight to this, did mention your name in it as someone that they maybe were not targeting. Do you want to kind of elaborate on that? And then also the political motivations there.
As to the latter, no. As to the former, the FBI and the interagency is constantly evaluating intelligence provided to us by interagency collection methods. Our partners in the federal and state and local levels, we are constantly relaying that information to the White House, to the Attorney General, to the United States Attorney, specifically here in D.C. And we will always assess each piece of intelligence and base it on the credibility that it was received and give it the due weight that it has. But as the U.S. Attorney has stated, and as President Trump's task force for Washington, D.C. has shown, we have reduced crime in this city by historic levels, and we will continue to do so. We will continue to safeguard the men and women that call Washington, D.C. their home.
All right, just a couple more.
Acting Attorney General, in paragraph 14 of the complaint today, it says that the suspect fell, and you said that he was tackled. I just want to see if we can try to make sure we understand.
Well, I think that both can be true.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I would rely on the complaint because that was sworn to by an agent and not by the words out of the acting attorney general, who most certainly was not there. But I think both can be true.
All right. Well, the U.S. attorney yesterday also mentioned that one of the charges possibly would be for assault on an officer, and I noticed today it's a different charge. Is this because you've determined that what he shot didn't actually strike the officer?
We're still looking at that, and I think that's something that you'll hear about in the coming days as we know the answer to that. It doesn't legally matter in that situation, but when after an event like this happens, not surprisingly, there's initial charges that we consider. Then you have the U.S. Attorney's team and the FBI looking through the evidence and figuring out what's the best thing to do, and that's what you have. Right? Just one more question. Yeah.
I have two quick questions. One,
All right, two questions.
I just wanted to clarify. You said the one officer fired their weapon 5 times. Was that the only officer who discharged a firearm?
I want to be very careful in answering that question because this is when you do ballistics evidentiary collection and research, it is very complicated. So when you fire a bullet, the bullet ends up somewhere. Sometimes you find it, sometimes you don't. And so from that, with that qualifier, we believe right now that there was 5 shots fired from the same firearm. But there's a team of folks looking at this that are experts, and the evidence collection team that were in that area of the hotel where the shots were fired have worked all night. They have the evidence they collected, but it's not an exact science from the standpoint that, for example, the buckshot, when that shot, it scatters everywhere. Sometimes it just disappears, actually, depending on where it hits. So you don't have to. Hopefully, with that qualifier, that's where we are right now.
Question about the timeline, sir.
Hold on.
I just wanted to ask what law enforcement has learned about why he was targeting President Trump. Do you guys believe he was upset about a certain policy or decision by the president?
The complaint lays out what I think is described as a manifesto, which is something that he allegedly sent to many folks, his family. That's what we have so far as his motivation. As the U.S. Attorney said a few minutes ago, what is clear from the complaint and from what we have so far is he was targeting President Trump. He described that in his manifesto. He was targeting administration officials. He described that. But as far as us understanding additional motivation, that's for the FBI and law enforcement. All right. Thanks a lot, guys. I appreciate it. Thank you.
You've been watching live coverage of the press conference in Washington with the acting United States Attorney General Todd Blanche there laying out the charges along with Jeanine Pirro, the United States Attorney for the District of Columbia. 31-year-old Cole Thomas Allen has been charged with attempted assassination of President Trump that carries up to life in prison if convicted. He's also charged with transporting a firearm, ammunition in interstate commerce. That's up to 10 years. They did outline the travels that they believe the suspect made from California near Los Angeles to Chicago, then to Washington, checking in to the Hilton Hotel the night before the White House Correspondents' Dinner. They also charged him with discharging a firearm during a crime of violence. Up to minimum 10 years comes with that, maximum of life. You did hear from U.S. Attorney Pirro there that there will be additional charges. I want to bring in our chief Washington correspondent, Jonathan Karl. John, we heard Pierre ask about the evidence that they have so far that would indicate that this suspect was looking to assassinate President Trump. They did not lay out the evidence beyond the manifesto that you have reported on right here, in addition to obviously being in the room and witnessing what transpired on Saturday night. They also talked here today before the cameras about the fact that he checked into that hotel on Friday. He was upstairs in that hotel. You heard U.S. Attorney Pirro say, obviously, had he had the television on or was watching on his phone, knew that the president and the first lady were in that room when he then came down about 8:40 p.m., they say. That's when we saw that video where he went right past the Secret Service.
Yeah, the primary evidence seems to be that manifesto, about 1,000 words long. That manifesto does not mention the words Donald Trump, but it does talk about administration officials, says that they are all his targets with the exception of Mr. Patel, presumably Kash Patel, the FBI director. There was, though, that one other piece of circumstantial evidence that was suggested there, and that is that the suspect, Cole Allen, reserved that hotel room on April 6th, about a month after it was announced publicly that Donald Trump intended to go to the White House Correspondents' Dinner. The suggestion being that this was long premeditated. The reservation was made for the dates. He checks in the day before the White House Correspondents' Dinner, and allegedly goes down as the dinner is underway, and President Trump and the First Lady are on the dais, and all those administration officials that he allegedly wanted to target were there in that room. I thought one other thing, David, interesting here and important is the question of the discharge of firearms. It sounds like what they were saying is that Cole Allen allegedly discharged his shotgun one time, and that a Secret Service officer discharged his weapon 5 times and ultimately did not strike Cole Allen. Interestingly, the only injury to Cole Allen was a scraped knee, according to Acting Attorney General Blanche. The reason why this question of discharge is important is there was somebody who was shot. There was a Secret Service agent who was shot in the chest, saved by his body armor, and Cole Allen was not charged in that. It sounds like they have not figured out whether or not it was Allen's gun that allegedly struck him, or whether it was a case of friendly fire from another Secret Service officer.
Clearly a question moving forward. Our thanks to our chief Washington correspondent, Jonathan Karl. Let's bring in Pierre Thomas, who is in the room for us this afternoon. And Pierre, you were asking a couple of the questions. In fact, the Attorney General turned to you first in this press conference. We heard them say that law enforcement did not fail, Pierre. We do know that there have been questions on the Hill from lawmakers about what transpired Saturday night. They came out and said that right off the top of this news conference. You also asked about the political climate. You talked about a number of assassination attempts involving the current president, and then the climate of other lawmakers being targeted across this country. And the Attorney General answered the question.
He did indeed. And David, we're perhaps in the most dangerous threat environment since 9/11. We're having case after case, almost monthly, of people taking acts of violence based on politics. And David, that is an ongoing concern. And I think one of the key things about this press conference as well, in terms of looking at the why, the motivation here, they're claiming that this email information on these messages that he sent to his family lays out the reason why they can charge him with attempted assassination of the president. Namely, he's in this particular message, he's talking about frustration with certain policies to include immigration. He's talking about wanting to target from the highest to the lowest. Obviously, the highest would be the President of the United States. And they believe that he came intent on killing as many people as possible, they said, to get to the president.
Quick follow-up to you, Pierre, because this was, in fact, your follow-up. You asked if they could lay out any more of the evidence that they believe the suspect was actually targeting the president directly here. And we heard the acting Attorney General Blanche talk about the searches conducted, both in California, another search here in the Northeast, and he talked about the devices that have been recovered, but didn't really weigh in beyond that.
Indeed, David. They have access to his mobile phones, computers, looking at his social media footprint. All that is being exploited as we speak. They're not quite ready to speak on it just yet, but we're being told that there's additional evidence that they are pursuing.
All right, live coverage this afternoon. Pierre Thomas, our thanks to you and for your reporting all week long. 31-year-old Cole Thomas Allen charged late today with attempted assassination of President Trump, transport of a firearm and ammunition in interstate commerce, having traveled, authorities say, from California to Chicago and then to Washington, D.C., checking into that hotel the day before the White House Correspondents' Dinner, several floors up, then coming down to that ballroom. The video you've seen of him traveling past the Secret Service there, racing down that hallway. And the third charge you heard John Carl talk about a moment ago, discharging a firearm during a crime of violence. That brings with it, in and of itself, a minimum of 10 years. Of course, attempted assassination of a president, up to life in prison, potentially, if convicted. Our coverage will continue. ABC News Live, abcnews.com. And, of course, you've seen much of the team right there. The entire team will be with me for World News Tonight a little later today. I'll see you then. Good day.
This has been a special report from ABC News.
And thanks to our David Muir, I'm Kira Phillips. As you just heard from the Department of Justice, it was providing an update on the shooting that took place at the White House Correspondents' Dinner over the weekend. Cole Allen is now being charged with 3 felony counts of attempted assassination of the President of the United States. He's also facing 2 other felony charges connected to the shooting. Let's go ahead and start with our Chief Justice Correspondent, Pierre Thomas, who was there in the briefing room, had the chance actually to take the first question to Todd Blanche. Pierre.
Well, indeed, we got new details today about the case, Kira. We know that he's now been charged with attempting to assassinate the President of the United States, that he's also charged with transporting a firearm across interstate lines to commit a felony or act of violence. He's also been charged with using a gun to commit an act of violence as well, Kira. I think the headline for today is that they talked openly about the so-called, what they describe, manifesto, in which they believe that that gives the motivation for the alleged attack. Namely that he sent this to family and others, in which he describes a desire to harm from the highest to the lowest in the administration. Also, that he was intent on doing it, that if other people got in the way, that he would be willing to attack them as well. So we got those details now officially on the record that we've been reporting over the past 24 hours. Again, a night of infamy in Washington now still unfolding.
We'll continue to follow it. Pierre, thank you so much. I want to bring in Don Mihalik, one of our contributors, also former Secret Service agent. Don, something that I want to ask you about, there was talk about this Secret Service agent that was struck, that was shot, luckily had his vest on. The president talked to him that evening. We now have confirmation from Todd Blanche that he's okay. He's been released from the hospital, but they still did not say who exactly struck that Secret Service agent. There had been rumors out there, possibly it was friendly fire. Of course, Todd Blanche was asked about this. It was brought up also in the press briefing. Lay out the scenarios here. If it wasn't Cole Allen, the suspect that struck the Secret Service agent, if it was friendly fire. How does that add to the complexity of this investigation?
So it was a uniformed division officer that was actually struck in the vest. It wasn't a Secret Service agent. The uniformed division officers are the ones that normally handle the magnetometer checkpoints, perform a bunch of other essential services to the protective bubble. But as we saw in the video, the individual runs past, the suspect runs past a group of agents, and then he's confronted by another group of agents and uniformed division officers. So you can easily imagine a friendly fire scenario occurring because the suspect is basically in the middle of those two groups of law enforcement personnel who all had their guns drawn, pointed at the suspect. Now, according to what we have been told, the suspect fired a shot at the uniformed division officer, and I believe the uniformed division officer returned fire with 5 shots. I think they want to go through the investigation, the ballistics, to make sure that the suspect did indeed hit the uniformed division officer, because I believe the suspect said he was going to use buckshot to minimize damage, and it's potential that if he fired a round of buckshot, that a pellet hit him and went into his vest, which would be another charge that the Department of Justice could level against him.
Got it. That definitely helps put things in perspective, Don. Also, Todd Blanche saying 5 shots were taken at Allen, the suspect, the suspect that was intending, in his own words, to go after the President of the United States, but he wasn't hit. What does that tell us about what went down?
Kinetic events are never clean. Kinetic events are never easy. And officers under fire or intense situations, their hit percentages drop exponentially, sometimes down to 20% or less. So it's not uncommon for a law enforcement officer to be in that kind of scenario, especially one that's being shot at and hit, for him to fire back and potentially not hit the suspect. If those were the only 5 shots fired, I'm going to echo some comments before. That was a miracle, considering all the officers there with their guns drawn. That showed incredible discipline of the other officers. But again, they're going to investigate this and figure out who fired, where they fired, and if indeed our officer, or confirm if our officer was indeed hit by one of the suspect's rounds.
And Todd Blanche making it very clear, you heard it from him, that law enforcement did not fail. Don Mihalik, appreciate you. Thank you. Let's bring it to our chief investigative correspondent, Aaron Katersky, now on where this goes from here. Cole Allen.
He was appearing in court for his initial appearance before a federal magistrate, Kira, and he was ordered held after appearing in Shackles' blue jumpsuit to learn the charges against him attempting to assassinate President Trump, among the others that you've been talking about. And it indicates so far that the authorities believe Trump was the intended target, and it relies specifically on messages that the complaint says he sent his family. You heard the acting attorney general say they'll be looking in the coming days and weeks for additional evidence to present to a grand jury to secure an indictment. At that point, Allen will be asked to plead either guilty or not guilty.
Got it. Thank you, Aaron. Legal analyst and trial attorney Brian Buckmeyer now. So let's talk about all the facts here that were laid out in these charges.
Yeah, it's the facts, and sometimes the facts that aren't there. I mean, you have the charge, and I think this was brought up in one of the questioning, that if you're charging Allen with discharging a firearm during the commission of a crime of a felony, where is the actual language that you're saying he discharged the firearm? The other thing, too, is we originally thought that the one officer who was shot might have happened from Allen. Now, I can understand if he shot a buckshot and the shot went in all different ways, but if one of those struck the officer, it'd be so easy just to pull it out of his vest and say, this is a buckshot, not a bullet, and they could go about prosecuting him in a different charge. I think there's a lot missing here. It's going to find out a lot more as the grand jury presents, because the complaint seems a little sparse in areas.
Interesting. All right. Brian, Don, Aaron, gentlemen, thank you. We'll be right back with a lot more news. Don't go far.
All across America.
Good morning. Hello.
Wherever we are.
Welcome. It's good to be home.
It feels like home.
Hi. When's the last time we dropped our things and went? Woke up somewhere that we both never been. Growing up doesn't mean good morning. How are you?
At the start of the day, letting us into your home, putting the good in your morning.
Man, it's good to be home.
It's an invitation to come together. Happy birthday. Brighten your morning.
Oh, George, how are you?
And the day ahead.
America's #1 news, ABC News, now streaming 24/7 on Disney+.
Tonight, breaking news. The terrifying shooting at the White House Correspondents' Dinner. New details on how the suspect got so close. Plus, amid strained ties over the war with Iran, King Charles visits the White House. And the severe storm outbreak moving east. World News Tonight with David Muir is the most-watched newscast in America.
Reporting on the terror attack in New Orleans, I'm Whit Johnson. Wherever the story is, we'll take you there. You're streaming ABC News Live.
You want to know what I've been doing for the last 4 years? I was in a cult, man. Who am I? Nature Boy. Nature Boy. Nature Boy. You know this is not how life's supposed to be. Where Nature Boy is, that's where I'll find my truth. I am your Messiah. Bow to me. What in the world is going on here?
Something was screaming at me no, but I ignored it. There was brainwashing, mind manipulation. He was king, he was gone.
SWAT team. Damn, don't shoot.
He had to be destroyed.
Nothing dies in nature.
This is such a special night. Thank you for being here. Every single person in here, you mean so much money to me. I am cleaning up tonight. Every single woman loves good girl. And guys don't want to say it because they're like, it sounds like I'm her dad. And it's like, exactly. Okay, just be my dad. I have sympathy for ugly people. I see you, and I don't want to.
This is what you need to know.
We'll take you straight to where news is happening
And give you what you need to know all in under 10 minutes.
The top stories, latest headlines,
What everyone's talking about.
what you need to know, all in under 10 minutes.
New episodes streaming every day.
Only on Disney+.
If I saw my male partner hitting himself in the face with a hammer,
Bone smashing.
steroids,
Limb lengthening.
I know what you are. Looksmaxer.
Looksmaxing is an online subculture dedicated to getting hotter.
The better you look, the more power you have.
Influencers giving medical advice to teenage boys.
By far the most popular is clavicular.
It's just never enough. It's an unobtainable perfection that doesn't exist.
Looksmaxed, now streaming on Disney+ and Hulu.
Is this hard to talk about?
Yeah, See how the ground's about to take off? It's gonna be crazy. I did a kind of a bad thing.
So you hijacked the plane?
Yeah.
He hasn't flown an airplane before.
How did he get that plane in the airplane? How did no one know?
Hey, you think this thing can do a barrel roll?
Trying to figure out how to use the autopilot first.
Boring.
He's going upside down. Holy!
Can we cut the cameras?
This is probably like jail time for life, huh?
Good afternoon. I'm Stephanie Ramos here in New York City. We want to get straight to breaking news. The suspect in the attempted attack at the White House Correspondents' Dinner appearing in court for the first time today. Cole Allen now faces 3 felony counts, including attempted assassination of the president. That count carries a potential maximum sentence of life in prison. U.S. Attorney Jeanine Pirro speaking about the incident just a short time ago.
But make no mistake. This was an attempted assassination of the President of the United States, with the defendant making clear what his intent was. And that intent was to bring down as many of the high-ranking cabinet officials as he could. This is the kind of situation that we cannot tolerate.
Allen allegedly broke through the security barrier trying to get into the ballroom where the dinner was held on Saturday night. I want to bring in ABC's investigative reporter Olivia Rubin for more on this. Olivia, glad to see that you are well. We know that you were at the dinner that night. What are we learning now from the criminal complaint, and what are the other charges Allen is now facing?
Well, authorities here, Stephanie, giving us a little bit more of the timeline and how Allen allegedly carried this out, specifically saying that he had booked his train ticket, his hotel reservation, I should say, weeks in advance. And that's significant because they say that they already knew, that Allen knew that President Trump was going to be at this event because he had publicly announced he was going in March. They say that Allen booked that hotel reservation in early April and that it took him days to travel to Washington, D.C. from California via the train. They said he left on April 21st, arriving in Washington, D.C. on April 24th. That's just one day before the dinner. They say that he had booked a 3-day reservation, checking in on the 24th, sleeping there that night, and then, of course, carrying out that plan on Saturday, the 25th. And they say essentially that he knew at the time that President Trump and Melania Trump had already entered into the ballroom, and that when he charged the security checkpoint at about 8:40, he already knew that they were in there. And Stephanie, they described that moment saying he charged with multiple guns, multiple knives, and that he discharged his weapon, the shotgun, as he ran through, then ultimately saying that it was a Secret Service agent who then discharged his weapon, firing at Allen, though he was not hit, and taken into custody essentially with no injuries except a scratch on the knee. Stephanie.
And did Allen enter a plea? Do we know if he entered a plea, and when is the next hearing in this case?
He did not enter a plea to these charges, though the judge did order that he does have to remain in custody until the detention hearing, which is now set for Thursday. So quite quickly here. So he could be back in court as soon as Thursday, Stephanie.
Olivia, thank you so much. I want to bring in ABC's contributor and retired FBI agent Richard Frankel for more on this. Richard, great to have you in person. The suspect, as you heard there, has been charged with attempting to assassinate the president. In his letter, Cole said he acted alone. So how is law enforcement taking all of that right now? Or I would assume that they are looking at other individuals that might be connected to all of this.
Yeah, they're not taking what he says as any truth yet. They're going to be looking at the who, what, when, where, why of everything associated with this incident. And the major part of that is, did anyone work with him? Did anyone assist him in getting the guns, in helping him go across country, in any of his intelligence that he gathered? Or did anyone direct him? Was he radicalized by somebody who directed him to do this? And so he was acting on his own, but acting also on behalf of a person or a group. So they're looking into that too.
And that would pertain to travel as well. We know that he booked that hotel weeks ago, planning to stay there for a couple of days during this weekend or this past weekend. Well, I'm sure you've seen there's been a lot of commentary online about this possibly being staged. And we were talking about this beforehand, and I think what you had to say was very insightful. What are your thoughts on those statements about this possibly being staged and being some sort of conspiracy?
Yeah, I personally, I don't think it was staged, but being part of a conspiracy, conspiracies are very hard to do because once one person's involved, two people are involved, it becomes, almost all-encompassing, and they're very hard to keep going without anyone knowing about it, which this was kept very quiet. However, I think that the FBI, as part of their investigation, is going to look into, was there anyone else involved? Who directed him? How did he become radicalized, or how did he decide to do this event on this day? It may not have been his idea. It could have been somebody else who had other reasons for him doing this and used him as a pawn to commit these acts. That's what the FBI is going to be looking at as part of the overall conspiracy or investigation into this attack.
And what type of questions will the Secret Service face? Because this individual was able to get pretty close to that ballroom.
Yeah, he got into the building and he got down to within a floor of the president with 3 weapons, or maybe even 4 if you have all the guns and knives. They're going to be looking at, and by the way, I'm not saying the Secret Service did anything wrong. I'm just going to say that they are going to look to see, is there anything that they can do to improve their security going forward? Is there anything where they can expand the protective circle that envelops the president? Do they need to push things back? Do they do they need to add layers of security? Again, this is something that they should do after every incident, and they do. It's an after-action report, and they'll have findings, and then they'll make a determination going forward. But in this case, listen, in the end, they did their job. The president was protected. He was safe. And also no one was actually injured other than the Secret Service agent who took a bullet in the vest.
I would imagine that many of the security protocols that had been in place will change now moving forward.
Yeah, they're definitely going to be looking at those security protocols, working with the hotel security. Again, what do they need to do with the people in the hotel? Somebody actually during the press conference asked, should they, have people leave the hotel? That's very hard, but maybe they can make it so none of the people who are guests of the hotel can come downstairs unless you have, your security badge on, like the people who were part of the event. So I think there are going to be some protocols that are going to be changed by the Secret Service.
Certainly. Richard, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Appreciate your insights. We're also following more breaking news in Washington. King Charles and Queen Camilla are now in the U.S., beginning their 4-day-long state visit. Their first stop is at the White House to meet with President Trump and the First Lady. They're expected to arrive there shortly. There's a live look at the White House there, and we're told they will all take part in a, quote, tea and beehive tour. Now, tomorrow, King Charles is set to speak on Capitol Hill at a joint meeting of Congress. ABC's Christian Cordero is following all of this for us. And Christian, great to have you with us. We understand you were at the dinner as well and made it out okay, thankfully. What are we seeing and hearing from the royals so far today?
As far as the royals are concerned, and thank you for your concern for me, Stephanie, but they landed about 90 minutes ago.